Chapter 909. Wake up, Delina and Marion are still waiting for your gifts. Rallis, Beliak, Valentina, and Alfred are all back. You're still sleeping here. Qijie gently nudged Jiang Hai and whispered to him. Upon hearing her words, Jiang Hai opened his eyes in a daze and looked around. Indeed, everyone was awake except for him. Gazing at Qijie, who was wearing transparent pajamas, Jiang Hai hugged her instantly and stuck his face to her indescribable place, rubbing it gently. Along with Jiang Hai's actions, Qijie found that her two places were a bit strange. Alright, it's still early in the morning. Haven't you had enough last night? Patting Jiang Hai's arm that was wrapped around her, Qijie's pretty face couldn't help but blush as she said to Jiang Hai. Hearing Qijie's words, Jiang Hai's somewhat heavy brain also recalled the absurd scene from last night. Last night, Jiang Hai's subordinates were still very restrained. At about 9 p.m. they had all left. Jiang Hai and the others didn't pack up, but directly returned to Jiang Hai's room. Yes, not only a few of them returned to Jiang Hai's room, but all of them returned to Jiang Hai's room. Delina, Marion, and Taraga all returned to their own rooms. Except for Jiang Hai, Qijie, Chia, Feng Yunshan, Ai Xiaoxi, Azalina, Galina Waskia, Wallace Shelley, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Sheila, O'Shirley, Bridget, and Janice all followed in and took the initiative to have sex. As for what happened next, it was needless to say. Jiang Hai was also very talented, but even if each of them had sex for 20 minutes, it would still take 5 hours. Not to mention there was also the second battle, especially with Azalina. Although she had been with Jiang Hai for a long time, it was her first time to participate in such a chaotic battle. In order to make her feel more relaxed, Jiang Hai had made a lot of advances on her. Jiang Hai couldn't even remember when he fell asleep. It seemed that he didn't fall asleep until dawn. According to the sunrise time in Winthrop, it was almost 5 o'clock in the morning. However, not long after he was shaken awake by Qijie. Okay, stop it, hurry up and get up. After patting Jiang Hai's arm, Qijie broke free from Jiang Hai's arm with her strong willpower and walked out of the room. After resting on the bed for about 10 minutes, Jiang Hai suddenly jumped up. If he didn't wake up last night, he could make up for it during the day. However, this morning's scene couldn't be delayed. After going to the bathroom to wash up, Jiang Hai put on his pajamas and took out a huge package from the corner of his closet. Inside the package there were already wrapped gifts. It was Christmas, so he had to give gifts. Carrying the package, Jiang Hai went to the first floor. At this time, all the people in Jiang Hai's villa were already sitting around the Christmas tree, waiting for Jiang Hai to open the gifts. Seeing Jiang Hai come down with a big package, these people laughed happily. Sure enough, in addition to the people who participated in the celebration last night, Relis Carter, Beliak, Valentina, and Ale Sarah, who were originally on a mission, also came back. They also changed into the pajamas that belonged to this villa and looked at Jiang Hai happily. Looking at these girls waiting for him in front of him, Jiang Hai also quickened his pace. Merry Christmas! Jiang Hai shouted to the girls in front of him. Then everyone laughed happily. Even Galina, who was born with a cold face, didn't find that after coming to Jiang Hai's villa, her smile was much more than before. At this time she was also laughing with Jiang Hai. Come on, it's time to distribute the gifts. Here you are, this is yours. After laughing for a while, Jiang Hai began to distribute the gifts formally. First he took out the gifts for Galina and Marion. After all, they were nominally his daughters. Although nobody took this seriously nominally, it was still nominally recognized by the law. After receiving the gifts, Galina and Marion immediately opened them. Looking at the 2 platinum and diamond-studded bracelets, they couldn't help laughing. These 2 bracelets were not very expensive, $50,000 each, which was about 300,000 yuan. However, Jiang Hai's bracelets were custom-made. The broken diamonds on the bracelets were arranged with the abbreviations of their names. Originally they were called Galina Evelyn and Marion Evelyn. However, in Jiang Hai's bracelets one was DJ, the other was MJ. Well, these 2 abbreviations were actually quite ridiculous. Wasn't DJ supposed to play the game? Weren't MJ Jordan and Michael Jackson? In this regard, Jiang Hai could only laugh. Who could he blame for this? However, the 2 girls obviously liked this gift very much. They immediately put it on, then jumped up with a smile and kissed Jiang Hai's cheeks from both sides. Jiang Hai accepted this gift with ease. Come on, Taraga, this is yours. After being kissed, Jiang Hai took out a box and handed it to Taraga. After Taraga opened it, she found that it was a Patek Philippe women's watch. All the girls in Jiang Hai's group had such a watch. This was bought by Jiang Hai when he went to Europe. However, Taraga came later, so she naturally didn't have one. Jiang Hai saw that she seemed to want it, so he naturally took the initiative to give it to her this time. Thank you, Jiang. Looking at the things that Jiang Hai gave her, Taraga was also quite satisfied. After thinking for a while, she stood up and kissed Jiang Hai on the cheek. After she went back to sit down, Jiang Hai continued to smile and divide the gifts. It had to be said that Jiang Hai was quite dedicated to these women around him. Jiang Hai more or less knew what they wanted. Although he didn't buy any particularly expensive gifts, each of the gifts was worth about $50,000 to $60,000. They were also quite happy. For example, Chi Jie got a coat and Chia got a cookbook. Jiang Hai specially went to the Tan family's restaurant to ask for the cookbook when he returned to China. It cost him $500,000 to get it. Of course, there were no secret dishes in it, but it was worth $500,000. Aphrodite got a woman's suit, because Jiang Hai saw that she seemed to like Zheng Jin's clothes very much. Dana got a bag that could cure all diseases. Of course, it was also a global limited edition. Hilda and Sierra got a mink. They liked this kind of fluffy clothes very much. Paige's gift was a set of perfume from Chanel. However, a set of perfume cost $300,000, which was really a huge profit. Ashiria got a set of makeup products, also from Chanel. Some Americans liked bare faces while some liked to put on makeup. For example, Ashiria liked to put on makeup. Thick eyebrows, red lips, and she looked like a dead child who had just eaten. However, Jiang Hai was used to it, so he didn't think much of it. Bridget got a set of nail products, which was the cheapest among them. It only cost Jiang Hai about $10,000. However, the nail products inside were worth the money because they were real gold, platinum, and diamonds, although they were broken diamonds. Janice got a pair of earrings. This was what she wanted the most because she hadn't pierced her ears yet. Azalina got a set of wool hat, shirt, and scarf. These things were not cheap and they didn't cost Jiang Hai too much money. However, they were made from the wool of the sheep in Jiang Hai's manor this year, so it was very meaningful. Jiang Hai also gave Valentina, who liked motorcycles, a gift. It was a motorcycle, known as the fastest motorcycle on land. Including cars, this motorcycle was the current world record holder, the Dodge Tomahawk. Unfortunately, this motorcycle was not allowed on the road, so after getting the key, Valentina could only play with it secretly. Wallace Shelley got a special computer from Jiang Hai. This computer was not to be underestimated. This was the best computer that Jiang Hai got from Google using his connections. Although it looked a little ugly, its configuration was the best in the world. This computer was originally custom-made by the US military, but Jiang Hai used his identity as a shareholder to get one for Wallace Shelley. In the future, the intelligence system in Jiang Hai's manor would also be controlled by this computer. Layla Scarter gave him a necklace, Beliak gave him a pair of boots, and Alessara gave him a beaded jade music box. Of course, the box itself was also a piece of jewelry. Galena received an oil painting. Who would have thought that this cold guy would like these things? After all the gifts were given, Jiang Hai also received a gift in return. Of course, there were all kinds of gifts in return. Azalina got an XM8 from somewhere and gave it to Jiang Hai. This gun had a great background because this gun was prepared by the US, but it had not been replaced with a new weapon. Jiang Hai was now a veteran when it came to guns. Naturally, he knew some things about the gun world. To be honest, he had always heard that Huaxia's gun clan was not too bad. It turned out that compared to the M16A2 level weapon, Huaxia's 95 gun clan was actually not too bad. It could be ranked in the top 20 internationally. But were there a total of 20 strong countries in the world? Jiang Hai chuckled at this. Moreover, the gap between the top 20 and the top 3 wasn't just big. At present, the best standard weapon was naturally the German G36, followed by the M4A1 of the US. This gun was called a carbine, but it was actually a rifle. It was powerful and most importantly, it was short. All the special forces in the US, whether it was the Marine Corps, the Special Forces, or the paratroopers, were equipped with the M4A1. Further down the list were the M16A4, Belgium's SCAR, Switzerland's FD553. Huaxia's 95 gun clan was only slightly better than the AK-74, but not by much. As Jiang Hai exerted his strength, a big fish shining with red light was pulled into the air by him and then fell onto the boat. Seeing this scene, John Turner and Louis Turner immediately rushed over, took out their mobile phones and began to take pictures. They had seen this kind of fish before, but it was the first time they had seen it alive. Wow, it's a red snapper. My luck is not bad. Looking at the big fish that was almost 60 centimeters long in front of him, Jiang Hai also laughed. After the two finished taking pictures, he took off the hook and threw it into the water tank next to him. Yeah, but it's not a small guy. Boss, don't you Huaxia people pay attention to a good start? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Philemon looked at the fish in front of him and couldn't help but laugh. At this time he felt his hands sink. It seemed that this should be a school of fish. He couldn't pull the fish up directly like Jiang Hai, so he was walking the fish. At the same time he also told his two sons not to look at the fish. Now that it had passed the school of fish, it was a good time to fish. Perhaps in winter the temptation of clam worms and the like for these sea fishes would plummet. Even the beef from Jiang Hai was the best bait all year round. The aura and energy contained in it was far from being comparable to some insects in nature. Animals were much more sensitive than humans. For these beef with aura they would not let it go. Just as John Turner and Lewis Turner returned to their fishing rods were also bitten. However, compared to their father they were far worse. They wanted to pull the fish back but they couldn't. They wanted to slip away but they couldn't. Looking at them Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Looking at them, Jiang Hai suddenly remembered himself when he first came here. When he went fishing he seemed to be very stupid. He caught a shark by force, but it was precisely because he caught that shark that his fishery now had such a patron saint. Chapter 9:15. Is it necessary for me to come here? Sitting in a Lincoln limousine, Jiang Hai looked at the scenery outside and said to Moses Adams, who rushed over. To be honest, he didn't want to come here. Although he has never been to Washington, to be honest, he has no interest in the power center of the United States. Because he doesn't play politics and he doesn't invest in power. What is he doing here? He wants to watch an NBA game, not the Wizards. Jiang Hai knows how bad the reputation of the Wizards is in China. Of course it's necessary, my dear boss. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but shake his head gently. Sometimes Jiang Hai doesn't care about these things. Other than that, he is really a good boss. But since he is a good boss, if he doesn't want to do something, then he can do it for him. Of course, this is not against Jiang Hai's wishes. For example, in this meeting, Jiang Hai is just lazy to come, not resisting. So Moses Adams will persuade him to come. If Jiang Hai belongs to the Republican Party, then he won't persuade him to come. Everyone knew that at the moment, at least in Washington, this was the territory of the Democratic Party. After their crazy president came to power, their goal was to set a new life goal for the grassroots. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to win against a woman with so much power in her hands, right? To be honest, if you want me to argue with those guys, I would rather play with the dog at home. Looking at Moses Adams next to him, Jiang Hai shook his head and then said with a serious face. When they heard Jiang Hai say this, Azalina and Wallace Shelley, who were sitting in the front, also smiled, but they didn't say anything because they knew that Jiang Hai was telling the truth. Don't worry, boss, you can stay neutral here. Moses Adams also said with a smile when he heard what Jiang Hai said. Speaking of which, the reason why Jiang Hai came to Washington was mainly because of one thing. It was the letter he received that day. Jiang Hai's life is very simple, so he usually doesn't have an email account. He registered one because he wants to play Pokemon Go. He usually doesn't even go online. Therefore, it wasn't an easy task to find him for formal things. Generally, letters like this were sent through email. If they couldn't find an email, they could only send a letter. Although this action was a little low class, the things mentioned above were very high class. In addition to some polite words, this letter was mainly to invite Jiang Hai to attend the Animal Husbandry Summit organized by the United States Federal Bureau of Livestock on January 3rd this year. Jiang Hai originally wanted to throw this letter away when he saw it. He has no interest in attending any summit. If he has the time, he can sleep with Chia and Ai Xiaoxi. But after learning that Jiang Hai had such a summit invitation, Chi Jie told Jiang Hai that he should actually go and take a look. Chapter 9:17. After that, everyone started to talk about the same things. Although the prices of beef, pork, mutton, etc. are different in different states, they need to set the prices first. Huaxia had suffered a huge loss about 10 years ago because of this. Huaxia is different from the United States. In the United States, beef and mutton are the main food. Although pork is the second largest in the world, most of the pork is used for canned food, sausages, fried pork chops, etc. Other than that, only Huaxia immigrants in the United States will buy and eat these things. But in Huaxia, pork is the main meat. But the farmers in Huaxia are very scattered. Huaxia's animal husbandry is done on a free-range basis. That means cows, pigs, and goats are all reared in the villages. It is not easy to count them, and that's why the statistics were not done for a year. Pork is very cheap. Jiang Hai remembers that year, pork is only 4 to 5 renminbi per catty. Even vegetables are more expensive than meat. After that, everyone knew that pork was no longer profitable. The next year no one raised pigs anymore. This time the price of pork instantly shot up. It more than tripled and was even sold for more than 20 yuan. At that time, everyone saw how the pork had grown. Many people went back to rearing pigs and the price of pork dropped again. The amount of money lost during this period is shocking. Most importantly, no one is confident anymore. After that, the government started to regulate the prices and check the stocks. Although they are unable to get the exact figures, they want to know more than 70% of the stocks and how much they can produce next year. This will make it easier for them to regulate the prices. The prices of pork are different in different places, and there is a range of regulation. For example, if the average price is 15 renminbi, plus or minus 2 renminbi, then the price of pork will be between 13 renminbi and 17 renminbi. This is why Jiang Hai and the rest are attending this summit. The American government wants to know how much beef they have in stock this year and how much they can produce next year. Then they will set the prices. That's right. The prices are set this way. It is different from the experts and professors. This is how the prices are set. It was just like the annual trends. In fact, it was just a few major brands and designers coming together to research what colors they liked recently, what they liked recently, and what companies were going to launch. Then they would integrate and seek common ground while reserving differences. Then they would discuss and come up with this year's trend. As for the price of beef, it was the same. However, this had nothing to do with Jiang Hai because Jiang Hai himself did not come into contact with these low to medium civilian markets. He only sold high-end goods. He did not care how much preferred, standard, or commercial beef you sold. He only sold those starting at $400. Listening to the introduction, Gary Johnson also smiled and stretched out his hand and said to Jiang Hai, "Oh, hello." Although Jiang Hai was very reluctant to have anything to do with these people, he also stretched out his hand. "I don't know, Mr. Jiang, what do you think of our Liberal Party?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Gary Johnson also smiled and said, then he began to introduce the situation of his party, regardless of whether Jiang Hai understood or not. To put it bluntly, this party was actually a party formed by businessmen, advocating a system of complete freedom. For example, large-scale tax cuts, privatization of the social welfare system, elimination of government regulation of business, abolition of labor regulations such as minimum wage, and stop government interference in international trade. Protecting private property, minimizing the number of government officials, freedom of everything, no restrictions on defense, no regulation of firearms, opposing conscription, and stopping the ban of the so-called no victim, selling sex, driving without a license, buying, selling, and using drugs. Think about it. In this world there was no regulation of firearms. Ordinary people could even buy missiles. Workers didn't have the minimum labor protection. That is to say, the boss could pay as much as he wanted. No one could control it. There was a maximum limit but no minimum limit. Selling sex on the street was legal. Driving without a license was not a problem as long as there was no car accident. Buying, selling, and using drugs could also be done in broad daylight. As long as no one died, no one would care. This kind of world, damn, what kind of freedom was this? This was clearly the end of the world. But for businessmen this was a paradise. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai was not a pure businessman. So after he finished talking about the Liberal Party, Jiang Hai did not have a good impression of this party. Without rules, nothing could be accomplished. Although he also hated being bound, there was no absolute freedom in this world. Jiang Hai always believed that human nature was evil and selfish. If he really lived in such a lawless world, then it could only be the end of the world. And Jiang Hai did not stay in such a world for long enough. So he did not say a word to their words. After they finished, Jiang Hai left. For them to let Jiang Hai join them, Jiang Hai just smiled. He was not crazy. It seems that the situation is not very smooth. After watching Jiang Hai get in the car and leave, Terry Boggs said to Gary Johnson next to him with some discouragement. To be honest, the reason why they spent so much effort to get Terry Boggs in was mainly for Jiang Hai. Because they knew that Jiang Hai had that kind of pasture in his hands. If they could control Jiang Hai or control that kind of pasture, it would be extremely beneficial for the development of their party,